You okay?
I can.
Okay,
I
good.
can. We're live now. You sound great. I'm Michael Martinez with SEO Theory. I'm the president of Reflective Dynamics Incorporated. And I'm here again with Kent Yunk of Roaring Pajamas. Hi, Kent.
Hi, Michael.
So Kent's made some technical changes on his side of the screen. And speaking strictly for myself, I think he does sound better this week than he has sounded in past weeks. So we were kind of brainstorming before we started recording because neither one of us really came to the session with a specific topic in mind, and so we decided to talk about website navigation. And what spurred that was someone asked me on Twitter to write a follow-up article on SEO theory for an article I wrote a long time ago about website navigation, and um, I'm still thinking about that. I'll try to get around to it, but Kent thought it was a pretty interesting topic. So I guess we should just go ahead and launch into it. I'll start off, and I'll say that website navigation plays a big role in how Panda, the Google Panda algorithm, scores some websites. And I've made this point publicly before. I've made it in some detail on the SEO Theory Premium newsletter, but it's not something that you can take to the bank every day of the week. Because it's the Panda algorithm looks at a lot of different signals, and some websites will have a lot of on-page navigation that kills them, and some websites will have a lot of on-page navigation that doesn't seem to matter one way or the other. So when I look at a new website, say a client's website, and they're struggling with any sort of quality performance signals, either in Bing or Google, one of the first places that I look is at the navigation on the page. And I learned a long time ago to use Google Analytics in-page analytics tool, where it gives you a percentage breakdown by link, navigational link of what people are clicking on. And you should do this on every page of your website. If you have 50,000 pages of your website, obviously you're going to have to sample, but you should not just look at the home page of a website in page analytics and assume that everybody's clicking on those links in the same percentages all throughout the website, because it doesn't work that way. The percentages change. And so when you look at what people are clicking on, you can get a pretty good idea of which navigation is superfluous and which navigation is critical. But you don't want to do it just on the basis of your most current traffic. You want to look at it in cyclical patterns as well. I try to go back a year in time and look at monthly patterns. Sometimes, if I'm really uh, looking for something specific, I'll break the time slicing down into weekly patterns. Um, Also, if someone's had a significant change in traffic in the last few weeks, then I'll look at a daily time slice for the last 3 to 6 weeks. And so what this tells me is how a website's navigation is hurting the user experience or helping the user experience, and what the users are focusing on in terms of where they go to next after they land on a page. And so in this way, I've learned through the years to get a good idea for the kinds of things that don't really work well when you include them in site-wide navigation. And I tend to move a lot of those things to dedicated pages, not really HTML sitemap pages, but well, like on SEO Theory, you can click on an archives page and you'll see all the monthly archives summarized there. I don't just put them in the margin of every page on the website. And so that's one kind of way that you can tweak site-wide navigation to make it more interesting and usable. And sometimes that can help with Google's quality signals. So I think it's a good start. With anything you'd like to add, Kent, or
Well, I
change?
think, yeah, so just recently I had an instance where there was a long discussion about the difference between um, types of navigation, i.e., is top navigation better than left-hand navigation? And what's the experience there? And frankly, it's sort of all over the map, because there's some schools of thought about, top being better than left hand because left hand tends to take up more of the space. And certainly if you're looking at a mobile experience, left hand navigation tends to be persistent and take up a bigger piece of the screen versus, top level navigation that just turns into the hamburger, right? So I think there's a lot of discussion, not so much from your perspective about how it affects ranking and search, but how it affects usability. And there's been a number of studies I know for how people behave and how that affects different types of navigation actually affect behavior on the site.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of conversions take place at the bottom of the page. Not every marketer is aware of that. But let's take those classic spam pages, the long pitch page, right? It's like somebody's got a $35 tool, and you, for some reason, you click on a link or a search result, you come to this page, and it's testimonial after testimonial after testimonial. It's got all the red paragraphs and all that horrible sales copy that just bullshits its way, and you end up scrolling all the way down to the bottom just to find out what the cost is. And that usually on those kinds of pitch pages is where the conversion occurs. They don't, some of them will put, we'll click here to buy whatever right now after a few paragraphs or something like that. But generally speaking, those guys tend to put their conversions down at the foot. And that is because people click on links once they get to the end of the page. And so I've had clients who have come in with top-heavy navigation. And I said, you should really take a lot of that navigation off there. People aren't using it. And they go, well, where can I put it? And I say, well, try putting it down in your footer. And of course, they think that footer links should go in the footer. And nobody clicks on footer links, right? So I tend to take a dim view of heavy footers loaded up with links. I'd rather put navigation links in the footer. And there are some very highly commercialized websites, like in the hotel industry, where you get a lot of navigation links down at the bottom of the page. So, well,
and I think that's part of the challenge is do you put footer links in the footer, or do you put the small version of the sitemap in the footer? Because often what you'll do is you'll see at the top you'll see sort of top level navigation with drop downs, right? So the drop downs pop down when you mouse over them. And then what happens is at the bottom of the page, they'll actually expand those so that you can see all of the main and the sub navigation in the actual footer.
Yeah.
And I'm not a big fan of that.
I'm not either. That's a terrible user experience. And I think a lot of people do it out of a misguided understanding of what creates a good user experience, but they also do it for crawl. And that's a terrible way of channeling crawl, because the more links you put on the page, the more the crawl page rank is going to be split up, and the crawler is going to have to, figure out a priority. Flat site architecture is a really bad design paradigm for large websites. It's something that a certain well-known SEO personality has pushed many times through the years, and a lot of websites that follow his advice get screwed, because they come back and they go, well, I followed this advice and my crawl died, or my rankings died, or whatever, something died. And so then we have to go through and help them build a tiered hierarchical site navigation structure. You do not want every navigational link on every page of the website. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work for users, and the search engines know that, so they're not going to let it work for them either. Back 15 years ago, when the search engines were more naive about these sorts of things, you could do that. You could get away with that. But that's not SEO. That's not optimizing for search, and it's not user optimization either. So it's really a bad business decision to invest in all those links on the page if you don't know why they're there. So.
I agree, and I think early on, and we've seen that. I mean, we've seen instances where when we reduce the number of links on a page and certainly clean up footers, the performance, the rank performance, and the traffic performance actually improves.
Yeah. I mean, people are still trying to put nofollow on internal links. They think, well, if I put 25 links down in the footer and nofollow 13 of them, that's going to improve crawl. All it does is hurt crawl, because the nofollow takes the page rank and just dissipates it to the rest of the web. And that's what Google calls evaporation. So in this today's newsletter, I put a micro case study in there about a website where an SEO is asking the community for advice on on a client site. And what I found on that client site was that they had a strange form of PageRank sculpting. They the way they've structured their URLs is they have page URL hash named anchor, and they put a rel equals no follow on those kinds of URLs. But what they don't understand is that the crawlers don't recognize named anchors. They just throw that part of the URL away. So basically, they're telling the crawlers, don't follow links to this page. Now, there is some debate about if you have two links on one page pointing to the same destination, one is no followed, one is not. What's the search engine going to do? And I know that at least one Googler has said that they would still try to follow the link that doesn't have the rel equals no follow attribute. But what if your only link on the page is no following a named attribute, a named anchor? Well, that's a problem, I think. So people really have just abused no follow in a lot of ways that they should not be abusing it. They shouldn't even try to use it, to be honest. It's if you want to use no follow on a website, there's only one good reason to do it, and that is that you're giving other people the ability to put links on your website. And there you want to automatically add rel equals no follow, but you shouldn't be doing it on your own links.
I would agree with that. And I think that's part of the challenge is that I think too much effort's going into trying to sculpt how PageRank works and how the search engine is going to rank your site. Because frankly, you know what, you put all that time and energy into it, and you know what, they change the algorithm on you, and suddenly they aren't crawling and attributing value to the pages the way you want them to.
Yeah. I mean, if no follow, they say that if you put no follow on a link, that just drops that link out of their map. And so if you had 15,000 links pointing to a certain page before, but now you're sculpting and you only have 3,000 follow links, as people call them, pointing to your page, that gives that page 20% of the site-wide value that it originally had. Now, that takes us back to how valuable is a site-wide link. I would say that it's an inverse relationship. The fewer site-wide links you have, the more important those site-wide links are going to be considered with respect to other links on the website. And so if people put hundreds or thousands of links on every page, there's no real value or importance that's being assigned to those site-wide links. They're not creating the value that you want. And then if you just go put no follow on a bunch of them, then you're just throwing away most of your page rank. So how do you compensate for that? You go out and try to get more links. And that's a problem right there, right? So I can see how people are still really struggling with basic website navigation, where they haven't even gotten into the user experience. And a point that you made earlier before we started the broadcast is that Google took those right rail ads off of their search results. And when I first saw that, I went and looked at our WordPress installations, because we have advertising and we also have navigational links in those rails. And I thought, why is it that we're seeing clicks on these rails, but Google is not seeing real value in the right side advertising? But they would have kept the ads there if they were making enough money. Well, on WordPress, when we go to a mobile format, a mobile platform, our rail is pushed down to the bottom of the page. So people just scroll right down to that section, and they can still see the links, they can still see the ads, and they're still clicking on the stuff. And so all Google did was say, we're not pushing that right side down below, so let's just get rid of it, and whatever we want people to click on, we'll put either at the top or at the bottom.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
So, and then you were making another point about those ads that I think we should go ahead and talk about. So why don't you take that and run with it?
Oh, well, so one of the things that I was talking about was the fact that Google has seen that there's not enough value in the right-hand rail ads. So what they've done is, that's a key part of their revenue stream, right? So they've got these ads across the top. Now they've got, and a lot of people don't realize early Google, there were no ads at the top. There were only ads on the side. So it was only as they evolved that they started putting ads at the top, right? And so now they're saying that what they're stating is that there's not enough activity going on in those right-hand rail ads, so they're only keeping everything in line, which in some ways I kind of think makes sense if they're moving to a mobile-friendly platform. So having just one column of results with ads top, bottom, and middle, which is what they're doing now, that's a much more mobile-friendly experience. But what they don't realize is that, maybe not so widely known is there are a number of companies out there that use those right-hand rail ads as an arbitrage opportunity. In other words, what they do is they pay for lower cost ads that are way down the chain. So now they've reduced the number of total ads on the page for the most part, but those ads on the right-hand rail, they didn't get as many clicks, but they often cost a lot less too. So what people would do is they would purchase or bid on those ads in the right-hand rail in the last few positions where they pay pennies for each of those clicks as opposed to the top level clicks, drive the people who click on that to another search experience where they have another set of AdSense ads where they get a better revenue stream. And then when people click on those, they make more money. So it's basically arbitraging the ad experience. So what's interesting about them eliminating those right-hand rail ads is they've now, if not completely gutted, they've certainly done a really good job of reducing the revenue for those companies that were basically generating a lot of revenue on arbitrage ads within the ad sector.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things about arbitrage is that people thought Google killed it years ago, whereas they didn't really kill it. They just made it harder for small players to do it. Mm-hmm. But the big players had the scale and the volume to continue doing it and continue making millions of dollars every month off of it. It's someone, I don't remember who, but somebody once said that search is a big player market. I'm kind of paraphrasing what they said, but basically his point was that if you have the resources, if you can scale up, you can get almost anything to work your way in mm-hmm. organic search. I think another reason, though, that Google might have killed the right rail is that it's easier to be user-friendly if you're not throwing ads in their face constantly. And, ad blocking, of course, is becoming a big issue with advertisers around the world. But particularly in the United States, I think something like 40 to 45% of all U.S. Web browsers now have an ad blocker involved. And I run two in my Google Chrome installation because a lot of people have gotten around one ad blocker, but they can't get around two ad blockers. And so what Google has basically done is said, all right, we're going to make your advertising experience top and bottom only. And maybe they'll throw one in the middle somewhere, but it's not going to be all these ads all over the page. So now there's less incentive for those remaining 50 to 60% of users in the U.S. to install ad blockers, or maybe everybody, once they understand that Google's not throwing all those ads up, a lot of the people running ad blockers will start to unblock ads on Google, and Google is paying AdBlock Plus some sort of a fee, I believe, to whitelist it so that supposedly you see their ads anyway. But I think ad blocking did play a role in that decision because people are just tired of seeing all the ad clutter on every page.
Well, and I think if we're going to spend time talking about the search experience and the use of ads, there's all kinds of techniques that search engines use to certainly make it clear to the user that those are ads, but make it pleasant enough from a user experience to still encourage them to click on the ad over the natural result. Now with adding a fourth ad at the top of the page and pushing a much greater number of the distance down the page before you get to natural results, I think in some ways they're leveraging that opportunity. Certainly,
it will be a short-lived opportunity, though. We wouldn't be where we are with the ad blocking market if people weren't tired of ads.
Correct.
And one of the reasons why Google became popular, it wasn't the algorithm back in 1998 and 2000, all that. The algorithm sucked. One of the reasons why Google became popular was it had basically an ad-free user experience. Alta Vista and Yahoo and all those other big early search services, they loaded up their pages with advertising early on. And they were just making, tons and tons of money off those ads. And Google came along with their ad-free search results, and people just loved it. And that's why a lot of people switched over to Google. Did Google find stuff? Sure, it was crawling. It was trying to build a bigger index than everybody, and it was showing a lot of stuff, and it filtered out some of the things that we didn't like. On Alta Vista, there were days when you'd go in and search for stuff, and Amazon would just fill up the page after page after page, and so users complained about that. And the early Google algorithm did a pretty good job of filtering out some of that stuff. It was still easily gamed, and people were gaming it, but the real advantage that Google offered in the early days was that it didn't have all the advertising that was killing the other search services. And now Google has filled up all its pages with ads and come back and said, this isn't working. We're going to stop doing this. So whereas the other search engines did not make that choice, Google is making that choice. We don't know exactly why they're making that choice, but I think that somewhere in there is the feedback that users do not like that search experience. And so putting 4 ads at the top of the page is probably also going to be problematic for them. When Google first introduced ads at the top of the page, they had like a big yellow box, and they'd put 1 or 2 ads in there, and you could easily determine that those were ads because the box was different colored from the rest of the page. And then for a few years, Google experimented with different lightly shaded boxes, and a lot of us complained to Google about it. And now I'm not even aware of a colored shaded background. I would have to go look to see if they're still even trying to do that. I just know that there are ads at the top of the page, and I scroll past them. But what does the average user think about all this?
And what you don't realize is that even after they got rid of that, the ads still had clickable white space around them. So it didn't matter if you were hovering around just the text. If you were inside that ad block, it didn't matter if you were over the white space or not. That white space was all part of the clickable space. They eventually got rid of that. And trust me, that was a huge upset in the ad market. I mean, there were people screaming, arms flailing, running down the halls over it. It was a big deal.
But it creates a bad user experience. I think Google made the right decision. And, advertisers should not want to be associated with bad user experience, in my opinion. I just don't, as a user who has clicked on the wrong ad because I didn't know where the click region stopped, I detest companies that count on that kind of advertising.
It happens, though. And so slowly but surely, I think Google has done a good job of cleaning up the act of a lot of the folks that are in their ad network. But it's still a little bit of a challenge, right, for the user. And quite frankly, the users do get tricks played on them, and it's unfortunate. But I'd like to believe there's a major altruistic push at Google to clean up the SERP in a way that makes the user experience better and makes it clear what's the difference between an ad and a natural result. But there's also the push to maximize revenue, and I think those priorities sometimes run counter to one another.
Yeah. To get back to the original topic of website navigation, though, let me kind of bridge these two topics here. I would say hardly anybody in the world thinks about advertising on other sites as part of their website navigation scheme. And it really is an extension of your website navigation. Whatever ads you run out there, we're trying to create conversions to bring people into your website. And so another point that you made earlier in an unrelated discussion, you mentioned that Bill Hunt has a tool that he's beta testing. And I'm going to very briefly describe it. You can go into a little more detail. He's comparing the performance of your AdWords to your organic search listings. Not the first person to do this, but there are not a whole lot of tools that do it. And so if you've got organic listings and you're running advertising against them, there are studies that show that you tend to get better click-throughs, especially on the organic side.
Mhm.
But take the arbitragers. They were bidding on those lower on the page ads because they were cheaper. Somebody who is very much aware of how the structure of the advertising on the page is costed out and how it performs can use that, can leverage that knowledge into all sorts of navigational um, structures. It's kind of like taking a wireframe and putting on top of somebody else's website so that when the user clicks on the wireframe, they go to your website and not stay on that other website. And that's a very advanced concept in website navigation. It's really off-site website navigation.
Agreed, agreed. And I think what Bill Hunt is trying to do is he's trying to help. And I think most of the users of his tool are bigger brands, but really help them optimize, number one, their spend, and optimize how they market organically. Because what the tool helps you to discover is what's working organically, what's working on the paid side, so that you can get both of those to work collaboratively together to both improve the efficiency of your spend and improve the performance of your organic content.
Which we did that at Quinn Street, you and I. We actually
We
worked
did.
with teams that analyzed the paid versus the organic side and tried to look at how to improve the efficiencies. The paid side guys, they had learning algorithm specialists and all sorts of tools and servers and stuff. But the organic side, they were still kind of struggling with how to get on top of that. And we were constantly, well, maybe not constantly, but I know that you and I had a number of conversations where one or the other of us was working on a project where we were trying to draw insight from the paid side into the organic side. People love to do that, but it's not so easy to do because there are disparities between what the user is doing on the paid side and what the user is doing on the organic side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's not always a one-to-one
Well,
translation.
and I did several experiments with some of the financial services sites where we would turn off certain keyword spends where we knew that there was a good organic ranking, to see how that affected it and to see if there was a statistically relevant amount of performance increase or decrease. Sometimes there was a small bump, sometimes there wasn't, but you have to have pretty high traffic. And we were doing some very, very small tests, so I don't know that we had enough traffic to get a statistically relevant result, but we were just in the experimenting phase. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more that can be done there.
You make a good point there. A lot of people that try to run experiments on changes in traffic and things like that, they don't have enough traffic on their websites. If you don't get millions of views or visits a month, you're really kind of out at the end of the spectrum of semi-reliable data because it's so hard to really determine what's going on. You need a relatively flat signal in your data, and that means that no matter how significant any individual event is, it doesn't create bias in your data. And large volume websites just have a much easier time of achieving that flat signal.
Mm-hmm.
Someone who understands bias in data analysis will try to compensate in some way, and we don't have time to even begin to talk about that. But most marketers who are trying to do this kind of analysis, they don't even know about bias, and they don't know how to compensate for bias, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's a very challenging role to try and take somebody's website analytics and use it to show that you have some sort of performance factor that can be affected by these off-site navigational changes. And I think that people really should look more in terms of how how am I creating navigational opportunities off my website to get onto my website, to get into my website. And there are large brands that will run advertising campaigns for different parts of their websites, whether they're selling different tools or different user experiences. I mean, let's just
Mm-hmm.
take the hotel industry. Major hotels will run advertising campaigns for specific resort destinations at different times of the year. It makes sense if you're in the travel and hospitality industry to know that you're going to have hot spots at Christmas, you're going to have hot spots in July, and you want to push for those different things at those different times of the year. But that's just a brief sample.
Mhm.
So I think we've hit the 30-minute mark, give or take. This is a topic that we can go on about for a couple hours, to be honest.
Clearly, there's so much to talk about, and so many. The good news here is, and for the viewers, is that between the two of us, there's so much anecdotal stories that we can tell about sites that we've worked on, the experiences that we've had, some of them were, intentional experiences and experiments, and others were completely unintentional and findings that we found that were sometimes accidental. So always fun to talk about, and certainly more to go on later.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come back to this. So, well, thank you once again, everybody, for watching, and be sure to tell your friends about our video series. We would like very much to build up our audience. We're not buying advertising for it, and we're just trying to get to a point where we're comfortable with our presentation, and everybody is comfortable with how we're doing the things. So again, I'm Michael Martinez. I'm the president of Reflective Dynamics, and my partner in this series is Kent Yunk. He's the vice president of Roaring Pajamas SEO, co-founder. So we'll be looking forward to talking to you again next week.
Bye, everyone.